Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you all for making time in your busy week to join us today at the ATHENA conference. And we have a great program in store. We all know that college costs have risen out of sight at a far greater rate than inflation, and even more sharply than those for medical care. As ACTA has shown, if the price of a gallon of milk had risen as sharply as public college tuition, we'd be paying $17.48 a gallon, which is an astounding amount. And the big question for all of us, the very question that ACTA asks in depth in its online college rating system is, what will they learn? But that's not all. It's okay? Okay. But that's not all. Is free inquiry still a hallmark of academic life? Does a liberal arts education transmit the past to give context to the present and preparation for the future? Are students being prepared for the responsibilities of citizenship, for a job, or for anything? Why is there such a proliferation of courses in ever-thickening catalogs? And why do zombies at some schools get at least as much attention as George Washington? How do we rein in runaway athletic programs? How do we control the swollen administrative departments with a dean for this and a dean for that? Do they really need a vice chancellor for environmental stewardship and sustainability, and a sustainability manager for housing, dining, and hospitality? Who is addressing the social and due process issues raised by the dangerous mixture of drugs and drinking that encourages reckless behavior and sexual assault? And most important, where are the trustees? What are they doing? Who is watching the store? Well, that's why we're here today. I have just raised many questions, but I am happy to report that the American Council of Trustees and Alumni has many of the answers. Today's conference title is Higher, Setting the Bar Higher for Higher Education. And in the next few hours, we're going to hear how ACTA is addressing these critical questions and setting a higher bar for higher ed. ACTA's hard-charging and dynamic president, Neal, will tell you more. She is an honors graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and initially worked as a First Amendment lawyer right here in New York City. She served as general counsel for the National Endowment for the Humanities. In 1995, Anne began her career at ACTA and became president in 2003. She attracts a staff fully committed to ACTA's goals, and her team is empowering us all with the tools necessary to shape a new and better direction for higher ed. Let us welcome Anne.
Well, thank you, Bob Lewit, Chairman of the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, and thank you to all of you for coming today for our annual ATHENA conference. I think, as Bob has said, almost every day brings news stories, editorials, and reports, many of them, in fact, most of them, critical of higher education. American colleges and universities that were once regularly called the envy of the world are now the object of criticism, often withering criticism from all corners. ACTA said in 1995, and we've been saying ever since, that higher education is facing a crisis of quality, cost, and accountability. And so as we start out this morning, we are going to be addressing those issues. I would like to have you keep 4 data points in mind. Today, only 18% of schools require their graduates to take 1 survey course in American history or government. Only 3% of schools expect their graduates to study economics. Shared governance is sometimes willfully and almost comically misconstrued to mean that administrators work for the faculty and that governing boards are irrelevant to the university's mission. In normal times, it doesn't matter, but these are not normal times. Clayton Christensen, the Harvard Business School professor, has predicted that in the next 15 years, half of our colleges and universities, public and private, will be bankrupt. The watchword, governance for a new era. Here's another point to remember. Accreditors are the gatekeepers for $175 billion in federal financial aid. Under their watch, costs have skyrocketed, political interference has exploded, and quality has gone down. College and university tuitions, meanwhile, have risen 570% over the last 30 years. 40 million Americans owe $1.2 trillion in student loans. Now, I've been at this business now for over 20 years, and I can tell you there has never been a more exciting time to be in higher education. But it's also a very challenging time, whether it's MOOCs or online platforms, internet classes, competency tests. All sorts of new ideas are emerging and are growing. And so traditional higher education finds itself competing with a range of new delivery methods. Of course, ACTA has never thought that stating the problem is enough. As Bob said, we are bent on presenting a solution, and so that is why we are here today. ACTA is here to prod and push and agitate each and every day so that what survives in American higher education will be something we can all be proud of. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The health of our society depends on the health of our educational institutions. So this is a mighty important task at hand. New realities require new strategies. And we're going to be looking at 4 areas today where ACTA is pushing for profound change: academic standards, governance, regulation, and cost. We'll be hearing from the top experts on the challenges we're facing, and you will be hearing about what ACTA is doing and has done to help us raise the bar higher. As you know, stating the problem is never enough. Having a solution is what we aim to do. So, sit back and listen and engage, because we will be giving you a significant question and answer period, because we really want you to speak with our speakers today. The priority of higher education must always be student learning, and so that's why we're going to start with that for our very first panel. I'm happy to turn the mic over to my very able colleague, Vice President of Policy, Michael Poliakoff, who will lead us in that discussion.
Good morning. It's wonderful to see all of you here with us today. Making higher education worthy of the adjective higher is one of the challenges that ACTA addresses, and addresses energetically every day. And that challenge is great. But this morning, our clear-eyed look at the challenges will be a springboard for celebration. Quietly but steadily, a small but growing group of colleges and universities is showing how a combination of great leadership and strong principles results in higher levels of academic excellence. It can be done, and it is being done. That is today's topic, with presenters who have been on the front lines of that campaign. Before introducing our speakers, I'm going to give a brief overview of the overall state of general education, or what is called the core curriculum in American higher education. This is the sad part of the story, or to be more accurate, the ongoing challenge. For the 6th year, ACTA has conducted a study of core requirements. The What Will They Learn project now includes nearly 1,100 colleges and universities. That is every public university with a liberal arts mission and a very large number of private colleges and universities. We study the publicly available materials from these schools to determine whether they require their liberal arts graduates to have studied 7 essential subjects: English composition, literature, intermediate level foreign language, American history or government, economics, college level mathematics, and natural science. That's not a lot to ask. That is at most 30 credit hours, a quarter of the number required for graduation. Not much to ask to be devoted to such fundamental skills and knowledge. The results are simply chilling. As President Neal mentioned briefly, the gaps are staggering. After that, we survey to see what happens, for example, when 82% of our institutions fail to require a foundational course in American history or government. 62% of college graduates could not identify in a multiple choice survey the correct term lengths of members of Congress. 96%, on the other hand, could identify Lady Gaga, while only 20% James Madison as the father of the Constitution. In a survey this September, coinciding with the release of Ken Burns' film on the Roosevelts, we found that 58% of our college grads couldn't identify the number of terms that FDR served, and a third were unable to connect FDR with the New Deal. Our D-Day survey in May revealed that over 40% of our grads could not place D-Day during the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt. Many of these young people, ostensibly the future leaders of our nation, are civically disempowered. Many of them won't vote, and when they do, it is quite unclear if they have any understanding of how our institutions work, and at times don't work. They have no sense of the tides of our history. Not surprisingly, the corruption of general education has jeopardized learning in all key subjects. Business leaders know this too. Here is what investor Charlie Munger had to say. ACTA does its best to fight this, and we are heartened that we have won the support of the media. And we're glad that the media shares our sense of the tragic comedy of it all. Zombies and vampires are on the march, as reported in the Wall Street Journal. Right across the college curriculum, they are slithering. A growing roster of silly courses feeds on our tax dollars and on the brains of our students, and they join other nugatory and ludicrous courses on Harry Potter, Miley Cyrus, and Lady Gaga in supplanting the kind of coursework that prepares students for career and community and citizenship. I'm very sorry to report that ACTA has been forced to become the national expert on this epidemic. Now, ACTA doesn't approve of grade inflation, and we've given only 23 A grades among the 1,098 schools. But here is the good news. I promised you that this would be celebration today. 4 of those A grades, and one of them is really an A+, emerged during the past 3 years. They represent conscious planning, efforts to ensure that students at those institutions would get a thorough foundational education. Those institutions are Colorado Christian University, Regent University, Bluefield College, and with us today, Christopher Newport University. We have with us today the provost and the president of Christopher Newport University. Would you both rise, please, and be recognized? We applaud the achievement of these 4 fine schools. And that brings us to today's speakers. While maintaining a career in high-level corporate management, Our first speaker, Peter Alcock, is working hard to bring a vibrant core to Pine Manor College, where he serves on the Board of Trustees. He was instrumental in his time on the board of Fitchburg State University in raising academic standards, and he served 2 terms on the Massachusetts Board of Higher Education. Our second speaker will be Paul Trible, who served in the House of Representatives from 1977 to 1983, and in the United States Senate from 1983 to 1989. Following this distinguished career in national government, Senator Trible has led Christopher Newport in its extraordinary growth from an extension campus of William and Mary to a top-ranked independent comprehensive university and the brightest new gem in Virginia higher education. Our third presenter will be Judge Richard Bray, who has played an extraordinary role as the president and CEO of the Beazley Foundation in encouraging Virginia's colleges and universities to honor the trust of our citizens in delivering an education of enduring worth. Serving for over a decade on the Virginia Court of Appeals, Judge Bray was named Chesapeake's first citizen. We have a distinguished panel. I turn the rostrum over now to Peter Alcock.
I appreciate your interest in Pine Manor College and the opportunity to hear some of the things that we're doing in Massachusetts. Pine Manor College is very symbolic of about 25 or 30 liberal arts colleges in Massachusetts that were almost a subset of education. A lot of them originally were junior colleges, and they all had problems morphing from what they were to what they could be, given the changes in society. Pine Manor was one of those colleges. It was a 2-year women's school. It was basically the top ranked, what they call themselves, finishing school at that particular point in time. That was the best place to go. It had the nicest campus, had the best programs, and had easy accessibility to Boston. There were many others along the way that were in the same position, Mount Ida, Bradford, and so forth, and Dean, and whatever. There was a long list. And that subset of colleges all needed to do something to adapt to the needs of the time when people wanted to go to coeducational colleges and then wanted to go to 4-year colleges instead. So that was the background and the environment they were living in. And all these colleges, all these 25 liberal arts colleges, attempted to make the changes and adapt to society in relatively much the same ways. In Pine Manor's case, they first went to a 4-year program, and that was motivated by declining enrollments. When that didn't work particularly well, they decided that they would change their group of students that they focused on. Originally, they focused on wealthy women who had gone to places like Dobbs Ferry and Miss Porter's and so forth, and there were no scholarships, and the school was flush with money, and it did very well. And it did a very good job of bringing lesser prepared women into college, getting them up to speed, and frankly, about 85 and 90% of them then went on to other reasonable colleges, everything from Boston College and Boston University and Simmons and so forth. So from that point of view, this was a successful institution. It was financially successful, it was academically successful for the niche that it carved for itself, but enrollment dropped like a stone. And there was no quite idea of what to do with this, excuse me. So they had decided, they needed a new president. And the new president thought it would be a great idea to recruit lesser prepared students and urban students as opposed to suburban students. And the resources were there. The enrollment was the endowment was fairly strong, and the financial condition was very good. The alumni were giving a lot of money to the school, so that wasn't a problem. And in a very short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 years, they went from having being a school to educating white upper-income women to educating minority, lower-income women. And there was no planning for this. There was no sense of, gee, their academic needs are different, their social needs are different. Certainly the money wasn't there. And then over that period of time, they became very dependent upon government grants, Pell Grants. 85% of the students are Pell Grants, and grants and loans and so forth. Fortunately, for about 10 years, the alumni, being a wealthy group of people and thought this is a good idea, basically supported this thing. And the board basically felt good about what they were doing. They felt they had a good social mission. And that worked until the world changed even further. And the world changed even further with the alumni getting older and deciding that they weren't going to support this anymore financially. And so the alumni wanted to give money for certain specific projects, rebuilding dorms or whatever, new academic buildings, rather than putting money in the general fund so the president could continue to go out there and lose money. And they came to a crisis about 4 or 5 years ago in that. And then to solve that crisis, they started selling off some property to become liquid. And then NEAS came along, which is the accrediting agency, and said to them, gee, you know, we're not happy with your financials. What are you going to do about it? And that caused a crisis. They were almost shut down. NEAS has them now on a thin string, and they will, and they're now at a point where they're willing to listen to some other ideas. The board chair I happen to know, and she knew that I had done some work with the Board of Higher Education, so she asked me to join the board. I joined the board because to me it was an interesting example of what could be done. The opportunity was there, and people seemed to have an open mind as to what we could do next. So I joined the board primarily to be able to work with them to try and get them more aligned to the kind of programs that we're talking about here at ACTA today and to strengthen the academics. The board did not know, remarkably, that the college had a low graduation rate. The board did not know that it had a very poor student default loan ratio. The board didn't know any of this material. I mean, it really is pretty remarkable how in the dark they were until NEAS came along and threatened to pull the accreditation. So all that's now been exposed, and people are still in a denial state of the fact that the students average about a 2.5 GPA and average about 900 using the old standard on the SAT scores. And this means that this means you need to do some remediation as a practical matter. And that the faculty has never thought about that, but you know, they're beginning to think about it now. So in talking with trustees from other institutions that have been 2-year, mostly women's schools, and now 4-year co-ed schools, the script that Pine Manor followed was exactly the same script that everybody else followed. Most of these schools did not have an education that included any sort of business subjects or economic subject, which is a problem. So the alumni who were on the boards, and the boards are mostly alumni, were totally did not understand strategic thinking, did not understand strategic mission, driving a strategy, and what were the tactics, and holding somebody accountable. None of this was there. So that's a serious problem. And frankly, today, it is a problem going on today. But anyway, and the additional problem that these private colleges in Massachusetts have is that when I was on the Board of Higher Education, we implemented a program from open enrollment, which was a disaster in Massachusetts, to requiring a 3.0 grade point average to enter any state college or the University of Massachusetts. And we also required to have an 1100 SAT score to gain entrances. What this did basically was this took the old public college model where your lower performing students would go there, take a few remediation courses and succeed. It took that off the table. So these students then were kind of were excluded from that pool, and they would then going into these private colleges, if you will, which actually wasn't a bad thing. It was a safety valve. But the problem is the private colleges then found themselves with students that were lesser prepared than they'd been before, because the better prepared students are going to better schools, basically. And I think Michael made the comment that someone said that, I guess Clayton Christensen said he thought that a lot of this college would be out of business in 10 years. Well, there may be less time than 10 years, and some of these colleges maybe shouldn't even be existing right now because the education they're giving really isn't that strong. It's more 4 years of maturation rather than 4 years of learning something. And so that's another series of issues, but that's kind of what we're faced with. What we've been able to do at Pine Manor to get onto this, and I think it's an interesting approach, the first part of the approach is the fact that you almost have to wait till there's a crisis before anybody will consider what you're saying. And after you've exhausted all other options, then you may focus on the fact that, reform is an option. And it's almost the last option that these people really want to face with. So that's where we are right now. I work with Michael a little bit, and we put together, and this is not the purview of the trustees, it's a faculty issue, but we put together what exists right now, and, what could we do with the current core offerings, and then add to that some stronger general core programs to come up with a school that had a good, I call it a foundation of knowledge, which would address the lesser prepared students' academic needs to get them to the point where they could do good, solid college work. Michael and I worked together on this, and we found a pretty good solution, I thought, and presented to the faculty and said, this is not what you have to do, but given what you have now, there's an opportunity to reform this, and this is a roadmap, and we're not saying you have to do this, but we are saying, here's a plan, and if you find a better plan, please let us know, but we want to see a plan. And so the faculty right now is committed to coming up with a plan. How much of our example and plan we use, I'm not quite sure at the moment. Excuse me. The lead off of this plan that we have that have been approved by the faculty, accepted by the faculty, is a math program. I've always thought that the holy grail of higher education was to be able to teach lesser prepared students, minority students in particular, from the urban areas, and be able to teach them and get them to understand math through integral calculus. I also felt that, if you can do that, then you've sort of broken the code in some of these other issues. Math is particularly poorly taught in the inner cities. And remarkably, Pew Charitable Trust a few years back put a lot of money into an operation a program to come up with something called Math Lab program. And they funded it, and it's being run by Pearson right now. So we're going to start off with that as a first round, and the writing composition is a very similar type program. And I think based upon the success of that program, we will basically move into other areas. Economics is a good possibility. And this has the benefit of teaching every student at a different level, and also reducing the cost by about 50%, while having, at the end of the course, you have an identifiable accomplishment. The students have to pass the test, so you know what they've learned. This is no longer fuzzy. This is what we've learned. This is what we're going to teach. This is what we've learned. This is our success. So that's where we are right now.
Good. Thank you. We'll have a good opportunity for question and answer to explore some of the details and nuances. President Trible.
Well, lest I be accused of filibustering like an old senator, I'm just going to share 4 thoughts at the outset so we can have a good conversation. First of all, Christopher Newport University is named for the sea captain that led the first English ships to Jamestown in 1607 and established that first permanent English colony in the Americas. We are one of 15 independent state universities in Virginia. And Virginia has a very different system of higher education than most states. Most states have a highly centralized system of higher education where some bureaucrat in the state capital tells you what you can do and what you can't do. In Virginia, we have 15 independent state colleges and universities governed by boards appointed by the governor, each of us able to shape our own destiny. And as a consequence, we have one of the most remarkable systems of higher education, both public and private. Schools can break out and pursue excellence, as we've done in the last 20 years. Also, schools can look different. There's a place for great doctoral universities like the University of Virginia. There's a place for a great military academy like Virginia Military Institute. And there's a place for a Christopher Newport that wants to look and feel and act like a superb private school, focusing on leadership and honor and civic engagement. First thought. Second thought. In organizational leadership, if you can eliminate the negatives, organizations often will lurch forward. But it's in those rare moments when you can align people's hearts and minds that you can soar. And that's precisely what's happened on our campus. Everyone, the folks that are cutting the grass, that are recruiting the students, that are teaching the classes, understands who we are, what we value, and what we aspire to accomplish. At CNU, we care about minds and hearts. Our purpose is to form good citizens and leaders. We want our students to choose, and it is a choice, to live lives of meaning and consequence and purpose. It's what we call lives of significance. That's why we study the liberal arts and sciences. That's why we emphasize the study of leadership. That's why we have a rigorous core curriculum, the first pure A of any public university in America. That's why our students perform thousands of hours of community service. That's why we built a chapel. That's why we celebrate a speaking tradition and an honor code. We believe that real success is a life well lived, a meaningful, consequential life. We want our students to choose to engage, to lead, to serve, to love, and in the words of Catherine of Siena, set the world on fire. A strong comprehension of core courses is essential to accomplishing that goal. Third thought. Presidents and trustees have simply abdicated their responsibility for shaping curriculum to faculty and to 18-year-olds. The role of the faculty is all important, but so too is the role of trustees. It must be a shared responsibility. In Richard's words, trustees are the window to the world. They need to empower institutional leadership with the voice of the people. Presidents and trustees must be a witness to expectations in the world beyond the academy. Fourth thought. A rigorous core curriculum and high expectations are not only right, but they can and they will be rewarded. The great tragedy in this country today is we ask so little of ourselves and our fellow citizens. My experience, and I'm sure it's yours, if you ask people to give their very best, they will astound you with their success. At CNU, we've experienced exploding applications, soaring SATs and GPAs of our entering students, an expanding reach and reputation, and perhaps most importantly, real improvement in things like writing skills, analytical reasoning, critical thinking. So I would suggest that creating and supporting and sustaining a rigorous core curriculum is not only the right thing, is not only the responsible thing, but it also pays huge dividends.
Thank you. Judge Bray.
The Beazley Foundation was founded in 1948 by Mr. Beazley, who had achieved a great deal of financial success after being bankrupted in 1929 and recovering, and came back to Portsmouth from his ice plant business and warehouse, cold storage warehouse businesses in 5 states, headquartered in Atlanta and Dallas. And when he came back in 1948, he decided that he wanted to do something constructive, most especially in the area of education, because Mr. Beazley had quit school when he was 16 years old. And he began his career selling coal and oil on the street in Portsmouth in 1906 with a $40 loan and a mule and a cart. Remarkable career, lost everything, as I said, and regained it all, and came back with a generous heart. But his goal was to see to it that any young person that was willing and able and capable of pursuing higher education would have that opportunity. So if you look at our pie chart today, 50%, sometimes 55%, depending on the year, goes to higher education. Of course, when I say higher education, I don't want to eliminate pre-K all the way through graduate school. We embrace all of them, and we have millions and millions of dollars invested in endowments in colleges and universities throughout Virginia. Each year we award thousands and thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarships. Well, I became president when I served on the board, and they asked me in 2002 if I would leave the Court of Appeals and become president. The president wanted to retire. And I agreed to do it, and I was ready to change careers. I'd been judging and lawyering for 31 years, and I'd been on the board for 9 years, so I was familiar with it. And I realized somewhere in the following 3 or 4 years that we were giving away a lot of money, and we really didn't know what that money was accomplishing, where that money was going. We knew the institution, but in terms of application, expenditure, investment. And so I had developed during that period of time a relationship with ACTA as a result of literature that had come into the office. And I began to read that literature, and it captured my imagination because it, to me, embraced the very core of education. Education is not about a nice cafeteria. It's not about a nice student union building. It's not about a powerful athletic team. Education is about education. Colleges and universities exist to educate young people. We see the embarrassment right now at the University of North Carolina, and you see how education and the mission of education has been compromised. For example, athletics. Students come to a campus, they don't know what they don't know. They come there with their parents, in many cases, and they walk around and they see the dormitories and how luxurious the suites are, and the offerings at the cafeteria and the athletic facilities, and they make a decision based on that. Very few of them have an understanding of the academic rigor that's going to be required of them during those next 4 years. Because of that, we've seen a deterioration, in my judgment. We've seen a deterioration of emphasis on the core curriculum, the fundamentals, the foundation of a liberal arts education. So with that sense in my mind, I spoke with the board, and we all agreed to retain ACTA to do a study, an in-depth study, a little bit deeper than what will they learn with respect to each major college and university in the state. The report was very dismal that came back. We realized then that we were going to have to begin to move in this area. And the weapon that we had was funding. But I learned early on that when a layperson walks into the president's office and the provost is sitting there, my credibility and my standing just disappeared very quickly. and that we needed ACTA to guide us, and we needed ACTA not only doing the study, but we needed ACTA to affect change as we visited colleges and universities individually across Virginia to discuss this issue with them. And we, of course, first approached the colleges and universities with the B, ACTA B, thinking that they were the closest to the core curriculum, and it would only take a slight adjustment. It seemed to me our experience was most often in economics. The weakness was in economics. So we've achieved some measure of success after I bombed the first time. The academic dean thought we were trying to buy the school, and the whole situation, I recognized and learned from that this is a world of the academy. It's the world of academics and academics. And that for me to have our foundation to have credibility, we were going to have the support of those that knew the business and were the insiders and could guide us the best. And thank the Lord for Michael Poliakoff and ACTA, because they have been invaluable in the work that we've done. The purpose of it all, the underlying purpose of it all, and I think you all understand, is when a student spends $40,000 a year for 4 years and graduates with a degree, BA or BS, they should be reasonably well educated. They should not be given a menu of courses, many of which are absolutely worthless. And then when they graduate, they are not only not educated, but they face the marketplace. And the marketplace tests what they know. And if the marketplace finds that that institution and its graduates don't know very much, then the promise that those students offer to themselves as well as to our country is dramatically diminished. So we've approached it in that fashion. We've been reasonably successful. It's a long process. I've learned that when you turn a curriculum around, however slightly, it's like turning an aircraft carrier, and I'm familiar with that in Norfolk. It takes a little bit of time to turn an aircraft carrier, so you have to be patient. You have to be patient with the president, with the trustee, the academic dean. You have to defer to them, you have to listen to them, and they have to be committed. If the president isn't with you, you're going to go nowhere. If the academic dean or provost isn't with you, you're going to go nowhere. If the trustees aren't enlightened and well-informed and dedicated and understanding of the problem and the reason that the institution exists and the value to the students of the institution, you're not going to make it. It's a team approach, and you need a faculty that's receptive to change, a faculty that understands education is the reason the institution exists. You pull education away, and the institution is an inherent failure, regardless of how many new dormitories they have, or new student union buildings, or whatever. They have failed in their mission, and in my judgment, they have committed a civil fraud on the students who have paid all that money and committed all that time, and the parents, to educate those children, and they're essentially uneducated. So, of course, when I listen to Peter and my good friend of many years, Paul, I just say I rest my case. They are our allies. Without them, we could make no progress. And the Beazley Foundation, I promise you, will continue in our commitment to make the funds available where necessary, to make the encouragement available where necessary, to support ACTA where necessary, because this is absolutely critical to enrich the lives of these students and give them what was promised that first day they stepped on campus. Thank you.
Well said. Well said.
One of the great joys of working at ACTA is being able to work with such eminent and dedicated leaders of higher education. It's also been a tradition at our ATHENA Roundtable to have a very vibrant discussion with all of our participants and members of the audience. So right now the floor is open for questions. Mr. Modal.
Thank you, gentlemen, for an excellent presentation. During the presentation of Mr. Trible, there was reference to improvement in students' critical thinking and analytical ability, which led me to wonder whether your institution is participating in the so-called CLA, or Collegiate Learning Assessment Tests, which were featured in the books by Aram and Roxa on the parlous state of higher education, and perhaps Mr. Alcock might also mention that with respect to his institution. And if you are not participating in some objective measure of students' advance in critical learning and thinking, how would you verify it otherwise? Thank you.
The CLA Plus is a very impressive tool. It is one that we have deployed, and it's through the use of that tool that I have asserted today that we're making wonderful gains in writing skills and analytical reasoning and critical thinking. So there are many ways that you can evaluate those things, but we do use that. It's a powerful and effective tool, and I would encourage it to others. Let me just say, while I have the microphone, that what Richard Bray and the Beazley Foundation is doing is remarkable. And the Beazley Foundation, through Richard's leadership, has been a powerful agent for change in championing and advocating the importance of a rigorous core curriculum. So I wanted to publicly thank him and Beazley for that leadership. And it's an important piece of the equation if we're going to prevail across this country. And then the other piece is having a chief academic officer of like mind who, with passion and energy and intellect, will engage the faculty. And Dr. David Dowdy, our distinguished provost, is here. He's been introduced by Richard, but I would encourage you to talk to David. And I want to thank David for his leadership and commitment to this shared purpose as well. And David can also tell you how we have deployed the CLA Plus test.
Thank you. That was a great question, and I couldn't agree with you more about the Collegiate Learning Assessment Test. When I was on the Board of Higher Education in Massachusetts, in addition to increasing the admission requirements, getting the GPA up to 3.0 and the SAT up to 1100, we also reformed a lot of the programs, and whether it's a business program and so forth. And we also worked on improving the general education program. The thing that we did not do was to use the collegiate learning assessment tool. What we wound up using was a voluntary system of accountability. The colleges like that, and mind you, this is a heavily unionized faculty that wasn't too interested in our ideas and change, by the way. The voluntary system of accountability, basically, you can keep the results to yourself. You don't have to publicize the results beyond the university. So the faculty and the administration knew the progress or lack thereof that the students were making, but it was never published. We have a change in leadership in Massachusetts right now. We have a new governor who is committed to reform. The prior governor was committed to improving education in the sense of a physical plant's abilities and that sort of thing. And we made some pretty good progress there, but reforming the educational programs, I don't think we can really do at that level until we implement something like the collegiate learning assessment. That'll kind of tell us where we are. We don't know that right now, and I hope that the new governor will do that. As far as the private colleges are concerned, they're a little late. They'll be late coming to the game with that, but I think at some point in time, that'd be very appropriate. There's been articles, for example, in Forbes magazine, some university presidents are using that as a tool to assess where their students are and to be able to use that as a sales tool, if you will, for how well prepared their graduates are to business and so forth. So I think it's a great question. And it's a great comment, and I agree with you 100%. Thank you.
Other questions? I'm sorry, back of the room, please, and then Goldie.
What percentage of college students today do you think are suitable candidates for the core curriculum?
The overriding challenge and problem in America today is the failure of public education at the elementary and secondary level. Young people are not being well prepared. In Virginia, for example, we have a very fine system of community colleges. Well over half the students that enter the community colleges need serious remediation. And so answering that problem speaks to your question. I think an exposure to these disciplines, an appreciation of American history, some sense of the way the world operates through natural sciences, a second language, or perhaps English, economics. I think everyone can be enriched by that experience and learn something important.
If I may, I would like to respond to that question also. Can y'all hear me all right?
I think yours is not working, but that one is.
All right. Yeah, all right now. In my judgment, we have over-colleged a generation, and we're about to over-college another generation. We're graduating generalists who cannot find their place in the marketplace. They're attending bar, literally. 2/3 of them are going back home for a period of time because they can't find jobs. We have a program in our area called the Access Program, and the Access Program has counselors in each of the high schools throughout southeastern Virginia. And the mantra there is college, 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 and they will not, they refuse, I've met with them many times, they refuse to redefine college to post-secondary school education. So what we're going to do is we're going to develop an alternative for these students. We're going to place counselors in all the colleges in Portsmouth, and we're going to do it by way of experiment. And the chancellor of the community college system is on board, as well as the president of Tidewater Community College. And these counselors in the public school system will contact, just as Access does, will contact these young people in their freshman year of high school, and they will begin to discuss with them career education, education in nursing, education in welding, education in manufacturing skills, education in an array of needed skills that are very much needed in the marketplace. And I keep going back to the marketplace because that's what's going to test the value of a young person's education. Ultimately, it's the marketplace. So we're going to do that in the hopes that, and these young people, by the way, this program will, of course, have a strong academic component. For example, the automobile mechanic certification program is a 3-year program. And a portion of that program is dedicated, of course, to the academic side. And there's nothing in the world to stop these young people from moving over to the academic side and going into what we call, what our community college system has in place. I call it the Gateway Program, where they can study for 2 years at the community college level, and they will be accepted, provided they perform, they will be accepted into an array of public universities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, I think CNU, all they have, so they can easily move into the academic track if they get into the career track and they decide that they do feel suited for the academic track. But going back to the question, I think that this mantra of college, college, college has been a disservice to 2 generations of young people, and they've been made to feel that they're failures because they don't go to college. Many of them don't go for an array of reasons, and it's certainly not always some intellectual deficit. It's other situations that compel them to other educational opportunities which are not placed before them, and with all the credibility and all the glory and all the promise that comes with an academic track. So that's another thing that we're trying to do, we're working through now, and we have a proposal in place. I have the numbers before me, and I would think in the next 12 months that program will be in place at Trible Community College.
I just want to toss out two sets of data myself, if I can take a little bit of panel time, to answer that question about who needs or who's ready for general education. You saw a brief snapshot of the surveys that ACTA does regularly on historical literacy, or really, given the results, historical and civic illiteracy. We've been doing these since the year 2000. The first survey was of seniors at the most elite institutions, and the results were terrifying. They continue to be terrifying. It is an absolute imperative that all students have foundational courses in American history or government. The fact that only 18% of the schools we survey do that tells us a whole lot. The correlation seems to be speaking volumes. The second data set that I would commend to people's attention is the National Survey of Adult Literacy, National Assessment of Adult Literacy. Proficiency is set in that survey as the ability to compare viewpoints in two newspaper editorials, or in quantitative literacy, to be able to calculate a total cost when it's given in cost per ounce. And the majority of college graduates, four-year college graduates, do not attain proficiency. If we had any doubt about the validity of the two iterations of the National Assessment of Adult Literacy, it was confirmed again for us by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, where although we can proudly say we are number one in terms of spending per pupil in higher education, we were a little bit below the average in terms of the basic literacies of four-year college graduates compared to other developed nations. These things are screaming evidence of why general education is an imperative for all students that go to college. And Goldie, you had a question you wanted to ask.
Thanks. Goldie Blumenstick from the Chronicle of Higher Education. I'm wondering from the panel what you think of the efforts by organizations like AAC&U to promote liberal learning in all college campuses, and also the efforts of behind the Lumina Foundation efforts of the degree qualification profile to kind of establish some more general understandings of what degrees mean. I wonder how that fits with what you're talking about.
The AACU, in particular, the LEAP program is what you're talking about?
Just in general, their efforts to promote liberal education across all curriculum in a broader way.
I think I like to use the LEAP program as an example to faculties because it's pretty well accepted. It's faculty friendly in many ways, and it gives broad parameters that most institutions could follow into if they decided to reform their general education program. So from that point of view, I find them very informative and very useful, and a good source to quote so that I don't upset anybody, frankly. If LEAP says it's great, then, you know, that's fine. Or if AAC&U says it is. The same thing is true of Lumina Foundation. I mean, I think they've made some good gains. They've brought the issue of graduation rates and retention rates to the fore. They spend a lot of time with that, I know. You know, everything helps. I mean, it's good conversation, and it's constructive, and I think it's well accepted by the colleges.
Richard and I are both aware of these organizations, but quite frankly, don't know a whole lot about what they're doing.
And I have to add, one voice is ACTA's. Our experience in What Will They Learn is that if it's important, it needs to be a requirement. Not a rubric, not a parameter, but a requirement. If multiculturalism is important, walk the walk and require intermediate level foreign language. Don't do the lazy thing and just talk about multiculturalism. If civic and governmental literacy is important, require it. make sure there's a real course, and not a course like American rock and roll or jazz or baseball, which we often see substituting as a foundational course in American history and government. We've taken a stricter line, which we feel that the times now absolutely require. Please, Dick Leslie.
My name is Dick Leslie. I'm recently retired as trustee of Sweetbriar College. And so my question for all three of the panelists relates to the role of trustees. All three of you have commented on the importance of the role, and when we talk about, in general, about the problems with higher education, it always comes up that trustees must take a more active role. Those of you in Virginia have a different, in the state system, have a little different system of selecting trustees than the rest of the country. I wonder if all of you could comment on how it is that we can have a more active and involved boards of trustees when in most cases they're selected by the president, and they're selected either because they're alumni, major contributors, and they're usually carefully screened to weed out folks like me who are going to ask tough questions and persist, so that you wind up with boards that are predominantly rubber stamp boards. And until we can change that system of the selection process, in my view, I don't know how we can hope to have a more active boards of trustees when they're simply ultimately rubber stamps for the administrations.
I wish I had an answer to that. It's a great question, and it's 100% right. I mean, Neal and I have talked about, where did the trustee system come from originally? Ann's feeling, I believe, I'm not going to speak for her, but she felt it was more or less based upon the jury system, going back, 12 people tried and true, if you will, to oversee, the law. But exactly where it came from, it clearly has some deficiencies, and you're right. I mean, if you're picking people from wealth and wisdom, usually it comes wealth is first and wisdom is second. That's a problem. If you're lucky, by the way, okay? So I'm not sure what the answer to that is. The crude answer would be public shame. That's been a tool used in higher education for a long time, completely ineffective. Barbaric and ineffective. Doesn't do anybody any good. So, but the answer is it's a very good question, and ACTA, I think, it tries to address the question, educating people. We have a competing organization called the Association of Governing Boards, which I belong to, and I've been to many of their seminars and so forth. And, they really do try to bring the trustees up to speed, but it is dominated by the faculty. So, your job as a trustee is to be a great trustee, but, you take the budget and we'll take the academics, thank you very much. Which is not what ACTA is looking at. ACTA is looking at reforming the academics, which I would argue is a higher mission, if you will. So somewhere in between these different organizations, I think, is the only way we're going to be able to strengthen the trustee pool. You're right, it's a very problem. It's not just a problem in the private colleges, but it's also a problem in the public colleges. I mean, I was appointed by a governor. I was elected to the Board of Higher Education, but I was appointed by a governor. And, that shrinks the pool of available talent that may reach some of these positions. So I don't have an answer for you, but I see the question. You're right.
I would simply observe that leadership matters. Leaders can make a difference on boards of trustees as they can in countries, and there's a woeful absence of leadership today. The principal purpose of a board of trustees is to hire and fire presidents. Presidents come and go all the time. Hire a president who shares these values, a president who's committed to shaping and supporting and encouraging and strengthening curriculum. And don't abdicate that responsibility to others. It is a shared responsibility for sure. The faculty has an important role to play, but it's not the only role. And expect your president to be engaged and to be a force, a positive force. One of my colleagues who leads one of the ancient public universities in Virginia said, I could never do what you have done at CNU because I don't have any influence on the academic side. My God. That's a stunning admission. So, aren't you all looking for a president? Didn't your president, or did you just hire one?
They just selected an interim president.
There you go. You're looking for a president. There's your opportunity. Find a president who's going to do something, for God's sakes, and who's committed to change if change is required, and who will be bold and passive, bold and passionate, and make it happen. You know, I lead a state university. I get a whole new bunch of board members every 4 years. Talk about the challenge of inspiring a group of passive rich people on private boards. Imagine having a whole different cast of characters every 4 years, especially when you go from a Republican governor to a Democratic governor, or backwards and forwards. So there are challenges that beset all of us. But again, I would suggest leadership matters. And boards have a responsibility. We need women and men like you who will lead boards and through the force of your intellect and passion, influence them to do the right thing. And you need to be very careful about the selection of a president, and you must empower that president to engage across the board in the life of the university or college, and there's nothing more important than curriculum, and require them to do so. And then make sure that that president selects or finds a passionate leader of the faculty, we call it provost, who will be a comrade in arms and recognize that these changes, if changes are necessary, will take time and take patience and take engagement and conversation. Now, David and I and Richard are Virginians. You can do things in Virginia that you could never imagine doing, I'm sure, in Massachusetts. But we found our faculty to be very open in these discussions, and they chose to be very positive. And they embraced the vision that if we're going to enrich and empower the lives of the young women and men entrusted to us, that a rigorous core curriculum with these 7 component parts was essential. And if it can be done on our campus and at the other campuses in this country, it can be done everywhere, given leadership and commitment over time. What say you, honorable friend? He agrees with that answer.
I'll add one thing. All of you, I think most of you remember the situation involving Helen Dragus in the University of Virginia. She, of course, made some dramatic moves as chairperson of the board, and she had the support of the board, and I know this for a fact. She had the commitment of the board members when she made that move. But just as soon as the heat turned up, everybody ran for cover. Everybody ran for cover, and Helen was twisted in the wind. That has weakened that presidency, strengthened that presidency, and weakened that board tremendously. And the restoration of that will take years. The damage that was done will take years. I think most of you know that a trustee of a university or college is not about homecoming weekend. It's a tremendous responsibility, and I don't say that cynically. It's a tremendous responsibility. All it takes is one informed member of most boards who will speak out and start asking the right questions, and all the trustees now are being informed by ACTA. ACTA's got publications flooding out all the time to trustees. All they have to do is start to read, inform themselves, and then the questions will be asked. And when the questions are asked, the answers will be demanded. And the other trustees will sit there and say, wait a minute, I wasn't aware of this. I wasn't aware of that. It's a cascading effect, and it takes leadership. And I will add this, you can't fracture the university system either. You've got to realize that the faculty has a huge investment in the curriculum. The president, of course, has a huge investment in the institution. In many cases, they've been reduced to nothing but fundraisers. The trustees also have a tremendous investment in the institution, and they have a commitment and a responsibility. But the three component parts can work together. It may take time, it may take patience, it may take cooperation. It takes the bridge of a provost, who is in fact a bridge between the administration and the faculty. It takes that bridge of a wise, enlightened, patient, and respected provost to cross that bridge and open the communication so that the faculty does not feel like that war has been declared on them. That is not necessary. It may take a little bit of time, but you can work through these things and it can be done. But I go back to the most important part of it. There has to be at least one person among those trustees who makes it their business to be informed. And then I can assure you very quickly the other trustees will become informed too. And there will be a change in the dynamic of that administration.
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, that's a very lonely position to be in.
Oh, yeah.
And it's worse than frustrating. You go on year after year, and you become more and more isolated, and that individual or those handful of individuals, one by one, eventually say, I surrender.
Surrender.
And life is too short to go on with it. Or they're forced out in one way or another, or not reappointed. And so you wind up with a vast majority of board members who are simply rubber stamps for the administration. And I don't think it's any kind of organization that anyone has ever been involved in where we would recommend and suggest that such an insular organization is conducive to good results. So my question really is, how do we change that? How do we find a way of selecting? I mean, in Virginia, where it's nuts to have a board that changes every 4 years, and then and they're all political appointees. I don't know how you folks have the incredible quality of education in the state colleges and universities that you do have, given the poor governance in the way that your governors are selected. But I think that underlying problem of the method of selection of trustees is something that needs a great deal more attention if we're going to move forward in the quality of education in the vast majority of colleges.
That's a profound point.
Remarkably, in a few minutes, we will be starting a panel on better governance. You have
There you
naturally
go.
evolved
The segue.
to this crucial topic, and as I'm sure you all know, we recently released a major report that was done under the chairmanship of Benno Schmidt, who's with us today, on exactly that topic. So we'll kind of hold fire on that, except I want to say one word, as in that old movie, The Graduates, but it'll be a different word: metrics. And I'm sure the panel will take that up. I see a hand up. Peter Wood, please.
I wonder what the panel's response is to
Peter?
an emerging threat to higher standards in colleges and universities. I'm referring to the Common Core, which has two sorts of effects. One is that it's an extremely utilitarian K-12 curriculum that focuses on sort of basic skills rather than on sort of the predicates of a liberal arts education. But the other more particular thing is that as part of the 2009 Race to the Top, the 45 states that agreed to go along with the Common Core also agreed that every high school student in those states that finishes it will be exempt from any remedial course at a public college and university in those states. Given the very large number of students who need remedial courses, that seems to be a very strong incentive to colleges and universities to mainstream the students by dumbing down their courses.
If Virginia's a participant in that, I don't know where those students will go, because they're not going to be able to gain admission to the public colleges and universities in Virginia. There is no dumbing down of our requirements, period.
In Massachusetts, the entrance requirements to college remain. Our governor embraced the Common Core. As you may know, he's quite friendly with the President of the United States. We have some grave concerns in Massachusetts about the Common Core. For one thing, the standards aren't as high as they were in Massachusetts before. For a second thing is there's a tremendous amount of faculty development time required to be able to fully implement the Common Core. And that just does not happen. So we're beginning to wonder if this is going to be the same kind of an implementation we went through with the Affordable Care Act, which doesn't look very good. So we're kind of concerned about that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where we are in Massachusetts.
Here, Richard.
If I might, I want y'all to forgive my cynicism, but the city of Norfolk probably has the worst public school system in America. Just recently, the Department of Education, President Obama's Department of Education, came down and found out and made a report that the children are not even safe in the secondary schools in Norfolk. Not only are they not educating the children are not safe. They're being assaulted, they're being abused, bullied, sexually assaulted. It's a disgrace. No politician in the city of Norfolk has spoken about it that I'm aware of. Now, right now, the schools board in Norfolk is appointed by the council. In the election Tuesday, the voters decided they wanted the school board elected. Maybe that will affect some change. But my point in all this is whether they have a Common Core or no core, until some profound changes are made, the public school system in Norfolk isn't going anywhere. And I don't think Norfolk is necessarily unique across the country. It's really tragic when you consider, and I see this over and over and over again, when you consider people, young people most especially, living in the city of Norfolk, both their parents are working, they're able to maintain a moderately middle class income, they have 3 children, they cannot send those children to private schools. 16, 17, 18, Norfolk Academy, $20,000 a year. They do not have the money. They have to send their children to public education. And public education is a place in Norfolk, which the Department of Education tells us is not a safe place. So I think the core curriculum issue is maybe really an interesting subject to discuss. But I think before we get to that, we need to talk about what are we doing with the curriculum today? What are the SOLs doing? How many of the schools in Norfolk, and I want to pick on Norfolk because Portsmouth's got problems too, but how many of the schools are being accredited? How many are being disqualified? How many are having their accreditation pulled? It's a tragic situation that has to be addressed most immediately, and to me, the threshold issues before we even get into curriculum. Can't we at least provide a safe environment for these children? It's, ladies and gentlemen, it's a tragedy. It's a disgrace. And Norfolk and Portsmouth are not unusual.
We have time for one more question before we move on to better governance. Please.
All right, Peter. You're our leader in this conversation.
I wanted to return to the question about trustees and their qualifications. Has there ever been any consideration given to an elected citizen taxpayer trustee position on the board of all public universities that receive, either state or federal money? I know that, in many states, the superintendent of public instruction is an elected position. And, could you have a series of little mini elected positions by municipal boundaries, counties, or some kind of jurisdiction? These people would obviously differ year to year depending on whether they're conservative or liberal, but they would be an outside voice. Would that be obviously opposed, but is it possible at all, or a good idea?
Well, I'm a staunch advocate of the democratic process, but I'm not sure that proposal would enhance the quality of governance in our colleges and universities. It would depend on each state. Each state has a different system. And as I mentioned, some states have highly centralized systems of governance. Others, Virginia would be the least centralized. We believe in empowering our universities and allowing them to shape their own destiny. And as a consequence, we have this marvelous mosaic of different colors and hues that arguably is one of the finest public systems in the country. But it would depend on the state. As someone who has had his name on the ballot on many occasions, I personally would not advocate that proposal. I don't think it would really result in the kind of improvement in governance that we all hope for. But the question that was, or the statement that was made by our friend who serves on the board at Sweetbriar is a profound one. How do we strengthen boards, the selection of board members? How do we do a better job of ensuring that these trustees bring not only dollars, but intellect and passion and commitment and a willingness to engage and lead? And I don't know the answer to that, but that is perhaps the threshold question. That's a profound one.
It is our perfect segue into our next panel, but before we make that transition, I want to thank these three extraordinary education leaders.
Peter, enjoyed it.